Let's talk about Adam Sandler and Pixels. Now, that movie opened in second place with just around 25, it was about 24 million. And it was essentially Sandler's lowest since Jack and Jill. And the thing, Sandler's never had an opening that was over 50 million, right?
Yeah.
But some of his strongest showings in recent years have been ensemble ones, the Grown Ups movies, especially Grown Ups 2 was, I believe, opened bigger domestically than the first one. But for his individual movies, it's certainly been sort of diminishing returns.
Right.
Now you can't even say, well, he just put him with a great ensemble because this one opened so low.
Yeah, and you also can't say that home video is necessarily going to save him. That used to be one of the things, something like Grandma's Boy didn't open big, but it kind of became a cult hit.
Any chance for him to talk about Grandma's Boy?
No, but seriously,
it's on Netflix now, by
that's
the
the kind of thing where, you invest this amount of money, you don't make it in the theater. Years ago, it used to be like DVD, Blu-ray is going to make up for that, and then you have this, this thing that keeps performing and performing. Office Space is like that too. Just didn't really do much in the theater. So, but now the tide has sort of shifted for that, and we're not selling as many Blu-rays. But we were talking a little bit earlier, and we were talking about Netflix as an option because that's what's coming up for him.
Well, he has that huge deal with them where I believe he's making 4 or 5 movies just for them. And the first one they've done is called Ridiculous Six, and it's like a Western comedy, and that's coming up, and the TCA's, the Television Critics Association's kind of annual sort of, I don't want to say upfront because that's a different thing, but they get together. Eric Goldman is there right now covering it, and they basically hawk their wares coming up for the coming season.
The networks get together and say, this is what we've got.
And Netflix now is there for streaming. And the boss, what is his name? Ted Sarandos?
Yeah,
or
I think so,
like that, was asked about the Sandler Netflix deal in light of Pixels not doing well. And he's like, we're not worried. He's still a huge box office draw internationally. But really, in a way, Netflix is still like the best thing that could have happened for Sandler at this point in his career.
It is that version of what I was talking about. It is that sort of I'm just gonna, check this out. It only costs me $4. In the case of Netflix, this even seems like a lower barrier to entry because most people pay $10 a month and it feels free. You're just take it out of my account. It feels free, so anything on Netflix, I think I could make an Olympic sport out of how I scroll through Netflix. It's just I
usually just sit there for 2 hours scrolling through it and then fall asleep. So
that's that's exactly it. That's the movie to me. I'm like, oh look at all these movies that exist in the world.
Channel Guide, the movie.
But if there's no barrier to entry, that is the perfect environment for Adam Sandler. And that's that is not as meant to be faint praise or whatever. I'm just saying his movies appeal to a wide demographic. Yeah. But if something doesn't look enough to spend $50 at the theater, if you're on a date, then Netflix is your option.
Right.
And so I think a movie coming out there if we were talking to our producer Kyle, he was saying if Pixels were on Netflix today, you would go and just
It'd be a very different
watch
conversation
right
probably that we'd be having.
Yeah, and it might, I think it's similar to what happened with the Seth Rogen, James Franco movie. The Interview, yeah. I was like, what is that called?
That really important movie from last year that crippled the nation.
Oh my God, I was thinking The Brink. That's all that was on my head.
Oh God, yeah.
So The Interview, it's kind of like the Interview. If that wasn't available digitally everywhere, I don't think that movie would have had. I mean, there's obviously all kinds of stuff swirling around that.
Right.
But I don't think that movie would have had as big a reception.
Well, I mean, for Sandler, his key demo is getting older. They have kids. His movies kind of geared towards families to a certain degree. Yeah. Sometimes they're a little too crude for that, but Netflix really does seem like it can save Sandler because if he just stuck with theatrical, I feel like the perception now is that he's toast. He's radioactive. He makes bad movies and people don't want to see them.
Yeah, I think first of all, I think people felt really burned by Jack and Jill. Did not like that movie
Wasn't
at all.
Pacino in that?
And I don't even.
I think he was.
I did not see that movie, but People felt like that was a real sort of step down in his career, and now
That's
like
saying
Pixels
something,
and
too.
Pixels just not like performing, I think is another thing, you know.
And he did do that smaller indie film a couple of months ago, The Cobbler. That's
Right.
also on Netflix right now, and but nobody saw that, and it got kind of dumped. It didn't get great reviews, but it was still like, you know, he was doing something a little different.
It's impossible to know too. Like
Yeah.
you can, I mean, Netflix will know if after the
Yeah.
first movie that runs, they are like, well, we're gonna opt out of the rest of this deal. Then you'll know that that stuff doesn't perform. But I think it's gonna be fine. I think
Yeah.
Ridiculous Six is gonna get promoted everywhere. I have right by my house. There's a Netflix billboard, and it changes every month. And I think that thing is gonna be full of Adam Sandler
Sandler,
movies
yeah.
over time. You know, I'm sure we're gonna see a lot of promotion for that stuff. And it is. It's like the perfect home for his stuff. And I think if Pixels were there, like first of all, they wouldn't have spent. They're not. Netflix is not in the business of spending, you know, $160 million to bring a movie to Netflix.
Right.
But, you know, I think they save that kind of budget for their series and stuff like that.
House of Cards.
But, you know, something, a $30 million movie on Netflix, like, that brings cachet.
Yeah.
They're replacing their business. It used to be about everybody else's stuff.
Yeah.
Soon it will be about, like, you get a subscription to watch all the stuff that only we can bring you.
Right. Now, not to get off Sandler, and we can talk about this maybe more
Who
next
would
week.
ever want to get
But-
off Sandler?
But I was thinking maybe, you know, Netflix could be a good option for somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you
Yeah.
know? But maybe we'll talk about that next week because we do actually have a reader email.
Honestly, I think he's making some good decisions. I think Maggie was a cool choice for
Yeah.
him.
I feel like
and-
Maggie would have been better served though released on something like Netflix.
Exactly. So like something like that would be a good option. You know, the Terminator movie, I don't think was his fault. I think,
Yeah.
you know, like that didn't, you know, perform and it wasn't well received, but widely everybody was like, he was up for it. You know,
Yeah.
he brought what he needed to bring to that. So he and Stallone are interesting examples of like, what if they did something on Netflix
Yeah.
series? I think people would tune in.
Well, back to Sandler though, we do have in Pixels, we do have an email from Matt who says, "Yo."
Yo,
That's how he
Matt.
opens. In the last episode, y'all talked about how pop culture, y'all, he actually writes y'all,
I love that.
talked about how pop culture may be moving away from 80s references in favor of ones from the 90s. Now, it could be that Pixels just actually sucked and 80s references are still relevant, but is it possible the people behind Ready Player One, the movie, have taken note of the failure? Could we see an amended story in Ready Player One that has more current references? And then, keep up the good work. Been a fan of IGN since Film Force at IGN.com. That's going back a ways, so thank you, Matt. So what do you think? Do you think Pixels will affect Ready Player One?
No. I mean, I think Ready Player One is its own thing. And I think the hardest thing about Ready Player One, which we discussed a bunch of times, is how they're going to get rights to all the stuff that they need to get rights to.
Yeah,
But
good word, Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, I was going to say that hidden weapon called Steven Spielberg. And that's why I think it's going to be okay as well. Like, I feel like he's going to get the tone of it right. He was at his best operating at a very, very high level in the 80s. So he understands
Yeah.
what was good about the 80s. And hopefully he'll bring that to that movie.
I'd love somebody to sit down with Spielberg and say, what was good about the 80s? And he goes, me. You know?
But
And
it's
that's it, he
true.
just
It's
leaves.
totally true. But the other thing I would say about that is, you know, Ready Player One is way more of a Willy Wonka style story than it is even. So I feel like the appeal of that is not just references. I think
Okay.
references will help tell the story in a very small way, kind of like Wreck-It Ralph. Wreck-It
Yeah.
Ralph used characters, you know, from the fabric of video game history. But the main characters in that game, or in that movie and the game, don't exist in video game
Right.
culture. It's like
So
some
you need something that you were going to latch onto anyways.
exactly. And I think you know, the source material, the novel is so good that I feel like it'll be fine. It'll carry through.
Okay. Well, we want to know what you think about Adam Sandler, Pixels, Netflix. Is Netflix the salvation of Adam Sandler? I want to know from you
Dun, dun,
guys.
dun.
Let us know in the comments below.